Cache-maniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
Yes, it's GeoGearHeads. Welcome to GeoGearhead Show 256. And if you're not recognizing the voice you're hearing right away, it's me, Chris of the Northwest. And I'm here with Daryl W4. Oh, wait a minute. No, I'm messing with you. It's a land monkey. It's a land monkey, and it's the bear. And this is the Canadian Takeover because you guys are all eating turkey and getting ready for Black Friday. And we snuck into Daryl's studio and we're messing with you. Hey, Dave.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good, eh?
We're here.
Timmy's bro.
Canadians are here. Timmy's absolutely, man.
Right on, man. Okay, we're good to go. So tonight we are just going to talk about geocaching across the border and a whole bunch of other stuff. And we're really hoping that you guys in the chat are going to throw all kinds of questions and ideas and thoughts at us so we can share those too. Dave, what are you going to talk about tonight?
I'm going to talk about the same thing, but if anybody's chatting in the comments, just make sure to add those extra U's because,
oh, please.
Yeah, otherwise we're just not going to be able to read it.
Yeah, as many extra vowels as possible.
Yeah, so if you talk about caching from Canada to the south, and I'll talk about caching from the south to Canada, we got both covered, and we should be good.
Sounds good, man. All right, well, why don't we start off with a little bit of feedback that we've got?
Absolutely. So some feedback came in from Sloth69, who sent in an email, and the email reads, "This past weekend, I was doing a DeLorme run in Maine that gave me plenty of time to catch up on podcasts. A couple of your episodes back-to-back left me feeling a little strange. Perhaps it was because the order of 250, Land Monkeys Cruise, and 251 GPSR picking, which I heard in the reverse order. What confused me is that with GPSRs with capacities for 250,000 caches, the travel show talked about loading the caches in dribs and drabs, bases with conservative extensions for potential side trips. This seemed like unnecessary frustration. As an alternative, might I suggest a bulk load approach for your listeners for the same trip? According to project-gc.com, there are 7,000 caches in Alaska, a few hundred in the Yukon, and 42,000 or so in British Columbia. Using the PQ splitter on Project QC, he gives a URL, but go to Project QC, you'll find it. It looks as though these would fit into 55 pocket queries. These could then easily fit into the GPS Map 64 series or the Oregon 700 series receivers. For the Magellan option discussed that only hold 20,000, here are some course trimming in British Columbia would reduce it so all the caches will fit easily. Yes, there is an implicit assumption that someone is using GSAC or GApp or GeoGet to stitch all these PQs together, but even that large swath of land is less than a week's worth of pocket queries. Similar results can be achieved with the TomTom vehicle GPSs, Garmin newbies, and some cell phone apps like ADrake claims to test with 30,000 cache database, and GC Droid handles 10,000 database as well. Apps usually have the advantage of supporting multiple databases as well, so the per database limit is less of an issue. Advantage of this approach include not needing to bring a computer to program the GPSR while on the road, less worrying about data plans, and fewer points of failure. It also gives a much wider radius in the event your travel plans shift for weather, civil unrest, or whimsy. This sort of technique has worked well for me on long road trips as well as the short notice power trips to the Mojave Desert.
Well, there you go. It's actually a pretty good technique. I like that. One thing I would say, and one of the main reasons that I actually do bring a computer with me is because I have experienced a GPSR just deciding it's going to stop loading pocket queries even though you tested it before you left. So I say always bring some way to reload those pocket queries with you when you're particularly on a cruise ship, but if you're going away from home. So that's really the main reason that I'm saying to bring, a laptop or, in my case, a Microsoft Surface or some sort of computer that you can reload those pocket queries, or even just have them reloaded on a chip or something. But don't trust everything onto one device, I guess is what I'm saying. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, we have a saying in my area of the world, which is computer reliability stuff. It's called N+2, which is N, which is how many devices you need, which is that GPS, and then have two more, one that's going to be possibly down for known reasons and one down for unknown reasons. So I try to adopt that. I try not to go in the field unless I have, well, in my case, at least two, because, you know, the third one's expensive and I don't have my company paying for it. But I always bring up backups. And yeah, I've had GPX files not load in the field, and I've even had map files fail me in the field, especially if they're on SD cards. They're a little more fragile, and having those backed up somewhere, either on a laptop or on a some sort of tablet where you have access to it, is handy, and it saved me from more than one jam.
Awesome, man. All right, so we've also got some feedback coming in live here into the script while we wait. And it's looks like it's from Daryl. It says, I've had GPSRs lock up over bad maps. Yeah, I think that's in part what you're getting at as well, Dave, right? So if there's some sort of bad bit in the map or something.
Yeah, I mean, I've not had mine actually lock up, but the maps just stop working, which is a little bit better than just them not working at all. But any type of device like that has a tendency just to go sideways.
Yeah,
every once in a while, especially GPSs seem to be especially twitchy about such things.
They can be. But Sloth96, thank you so much for the feedback and the interesting approach to using Project GC and other tools to put together a more comprehensive plan before you go. It's good thinking. All right, so sir, we are going to get right into cross-border caching.
Excellent.
So you're going to talk about south to north. I'm going to talk about north to south.
Sounds good to me.
Why don't we start off focusing on that border that where there is not currently yet a wall?
Not yet.
We're waiting on it. But
we're a border wall contractor. I hear there's a bid going out soon, so you might want to keep your eyes open for that.
Good news. Maybe a new line of work here. All right. So passports and Nexus cards. Maybe that's something we can start about, getting across that border.
Yes, that is the tricky bit. Interesting thing about the border is if you are an adult, which is 18 years or older, you need a passport to get across the border, either if you're flying or you're driving. There is the Nexus program, which is like a quick, you're kind of pre-approved and background checked and stuff like that. Exactly. That makes it go quicker. You still need I do believe you need your passport as well. I don't have a Nexus. Do you have a Nexus? Do you know how that works?
I do have a Nexus. And so the rules as they're written on the website and as you sign off and say, yes, I agree to abide by the rules, say that you will always bring your passport and your Nexus. I have never once been in a situation where they have said, okay, thanks for your Nexus card, where's your passport? So it's never, in traveling in either direction, never been an issue, but the rules are that you should have both. I don't know, maybe they've changed that since we've gotten our Nexus. I almost never carry both anymore. And having the Nexus card, it is just so super easy. And my goodness, the main thing is, as Dave said, because you're pre-approved, you're basically pre-cleared. They do a whole lot of criminal checks and background checks and everything else on you. So it's quite an ordeal to get one. But if you get one, the lineups are so short.
Yeah, I don't have one, and I'm jealous every time I go to the border.
I'll tell you, man, I get across that border. I drive up to that border, and perfect example, I went to Chris of the Northwest's birthday party last August. So I drove all the way down to Tacoma, went to his birthday party, had a great time. I'm coming back home. It's a Sunday night. I'm thinking, it's 9 o'clock at night on a Sunday. There should be no border lineup. As I get close, there's a 45-minute border lineup. I'm thinking, are you kidding me? And so then I just drove around everybody into the Nexus lane and drove straight up to the booth.
Nice. Yeah, those border crossings, sometimes they take minutes. The listeners probably don't know this, but I'm actually in Canada right now. I came up just for the show. I really came up to visit family because the Thanksgiving break gives us a bunch of time off. But we drove right up to the border. There was nothing there. It took 5 minutes to get across. But I've also waited an hour, which is trickier when you have kids because they don't have the patience level. But one nice thing about crossing at the land crossing, though, is that kids under 18 don't need passports. They can get away with their birth certificates,
Yep.
Which is handy. If you're flying, everyone needs a passport, but at the Canadian-U.S. land crossings, birth certificates are sufficient for minors.
Good point. Good point. And what if someone's listening to this podcast and they're not a citizen of either Canada or the United States of America?
Oh, that I don't know. I don't know the specifics, but when I've seen people cross that are not either American or Canadian, they normally have to just go in for a secondary inspection and get a visa,
Right.
which is normally doesn't take that much time, but they can just get one at the border. I don't think it has to be pre-approved necessarily, although I'm not really sure. If you're not either of those and you're crossing the U.S.-Canadian border, I would do some research ahead of time. I know a fellow who is French, like his citizenship was France, and he was able just to cross the border by going into secondary and getting a visa just then. But not every country has agreements with other countries as to what's allowed and what's not allowed, and what paperwork is required and what paperwork is not required. Of course, Canada and the U.S. have a fairly free-flowing relationship as far as these things go. But if you're not a citizen of either country, definitely do your homework before you get to the border, just so you know what to expect.
Absolutely, yeah. And so, for example, our family this past summer was visiting from Germany. So they had used their passports as all they needed to travel from Germany to Canada. And while they were here, what they found, or well, actually what they knew because they'd done their research before them. At one point, I was like, "Hey, why don't we just all go down? We'll go down to Blaine, just to cross the border for the afternoon." And my cousin said, "No, we can't." I said, "Oh, why not?" She said, "Because we don't have a visa. We didn't plan for it." So they would have to have applied in advance and gotten the paperwork done for a visa in order to go from Canada to the US as a German citizen visiting Canada. So yeah, it's that thing where you're going to the third country. But it looks like we've also got some feedback from the chat. Dave, you want to take that?
Yeah, it's I don't know the name. I'm going to butcher it, and I apologize in advance. I think it's Team Mahavu or Mahavju, probably Mahavu, from the YouTube chat. And he says, as an EU citizen, I like the old-fashioned concepts of borders that you guys have to endure. And ain't that the truth? Yes, interesting story. Well, interesting to me anyways, but I have a microphone, so you guys get to listen. My very first geocaching experience was in Belgium, which of course is an EU country. And we found a geocache, and we liked it so much we decided to go for a second cache. And so we loaded up the GPS and drove across. And it wasn't until we got to the next cache that we realized that we had crossed the border into France. My first experience was cross-border caching, but in Europe, and there are no borders. It's just like crossing a state or province in our neck of the woods.
Yeah, that's pretty unusual.
It is. It makes life a lot easier from a planning your day point of view.
Oh yeah, just get in the car and go, right?
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Hey, well,
can't do that here.
I guess in Canada we can just get in the car and go anyways. We just don't go south. But you want to go northwest, east, you can go for days. Oh dear. All right, so some other stuff we should be considering when crossing south or crossing north. There's obviously different currencies, so there's the exchange rate, and wow, what the heck, US the Canadian dollar just got pounded after that last election. So we welcome all you Americans to come up here and stay the night and spend your money.
Yeah, it's like 75 cents US for the Canadian dollar. So
last time I checked, yeah, it's brutal.
Which if you guys aren't familiar with currency, that means that everything in Canada is about 25% cheaper if you're paying in American dollars. So big discounts there.
Yeah.
But also means more expensive going the other way.
It does right now for the Canadians. So, you're not going to see as many Canadians spending a lot of time down in the U.S., but we're hopefully, welcoming you all up here for our northern wonderful winter geocaching experiences.
It is nice out there. I mean, it's Canada in winters. aside from the fact that it's obviously cold and snowy, but if you're prepared for it, there's a lot of nice things about Canadian winters. There's a lot of beautiful landscapes and things to do, and many Tim Hortons.
That's right.
Come on up. It's great, and yeah, it's good.
Right on. Well, speaking of Tim Hortons, Dave, I think you had some fun facts for us about Tim Hortons.
I do have a fun fact that I just got from the CBC News. Moncton, New Brunswick has the most Tim Hortons per capita in Canada, which means by extension, in the world. And so there's one Tim's per 3,800 people in Moncton, for whatever reason. Yeah.
That's a lot of Timmys. I mean, there's a lot of Timmys in every major Canadian city, period. But
Oh yeah,
it's 800 people. That's pretty good.
It's impressive. That's a lot of French vanilla cappuccinos.
It is, absolutely. Well, speaking of food though, and Timmy's, one of the things that people should be aware of if they're going to cross a border either direction is there's a lot of food types that you cannot just bring with you across the border. Even though you figure, I'm just going for a day trip, I'll make a sandwich, I'll bring some fruit, I'll be good. No, you can't do that.
Yeah, pretty much anything organic, they're really fussy with bringing across the border. I'm not sure how picky they are going into Canada, but going to the States, they can be quite strict. Another interesting fact is Kinder eggs are illegal in the U.S.
There you go. So, but what if
you're not
you pack some Kinder eggs for your kids and you cross the border? Are they going to raid your car and beat you up?
They may. You never know. It's actually odds are they're just going to take it from you and say, you can't have this. But it technically is up to a $10,000 fine.
Really,
to bring a
Kinder egg
which is pretty strict. And if you're not familiar with a Kinder egg, it's basically a chocolate egg with like a toy thing inside. But yeah, it's illegal. So be careful.
That's crazy, man. All right. So there's that. Well, and speaking of bringing things across the border, one of the things that we're always bringing with us, anybody who's going geocaching has often trackables that you've picked up somewhere and you're moving it along to the next geocache. Something to think about. Technically, letter of the law, you are supposed to declare anything that you are bringing across the border that is not yours. And in fact, you are not supposed to bring anything that is not yours across the border. So
yeah. So
technically, letter of the law, you're not allowed to bring trackables across the border.
I think you can bring them across. Like my understanding is, I think Nexus has specific issues about not bringing anything across. But as long as you declare it as not being yours and it's still a legal thing, I think it's okay.
I honestly don't think, unless there's some extenuating circumstance.
Keep in mind,
I don't think they're going to.
None of us are lawyers, so
yeah, yeah. Please, yeah. Caveat, big caveat, asterisks on the show here. None of us are lawyers, exactly.
Yes, but it is an interesting thing because I have carried trackables across many borders, the Canadian-U.S. one, and I've carried them to Europe and back from Europe, and I've never actually said yes. So technically, I'm a felon, I suppose. Sorry.
Gelling like a felon.
That's right.
All right. Hey, so let's maybe talk about some other things. And speaking on that concept of what's in your vehicle, you made a comment here in the show notes about know what's in your vehicle. You want to talk about that a little bit, Dave?
Yeah, that's right. So when you cross the border, you are responsible for everything that is in your car. Or your truck or whatever, even if it's not yours. So if you're just going on a day trip and somebody has something not allowed, like your wife left the Kinder egg in the front seat and you went across, even though she's not with you, you're still responsible for that. So if you're going to cross, you should really make sure to know what's in your vehicle. This especially came up. There's this TV show called Border Security, and they. Have you seen this?
Oh, I love this show. I love this show.
So if you don't know, it basically follows. There's an American one, a Canadian one. It's also an Australian one, but that's not apropos to this episode. But it basically follows the Canadian border security or the American border security, and kind of goes through their day, and they have like, somebody crosses the border, they have an issue, they deal with it. Yeah, it's kind of like a documentary style type thing. And one of the big things that comes up is people crossing the border and not realizing that there was something in their car. The big ones that come to mind is people crossing into Canada, and they may normally carry a gun in the US, which is perfectly legal, but they might have like, they forgot that there's a box of ammo in the trunk. So they didn't bring their gun, but there's ammo, and you can't bring ammo either across the border, but it's still in the car, so that causes an issue. So whenever you're crossing the border, either way, just make sure you know what's in there and take out anything that is not allowed across the border, which includes guns, includes ammo.
Ammo cans.
Because ammo, are ammo cans? What's the deal with ammo cans? They're perfectly legal in the States, but I've heard issues with being in.
So you can have them. The problem is it's the same kind of scenario, right? So imagine you show up at the border and you got an ammo can sitting in your car. Well, the first thought they're going to have is there's ammunition in there. So you're immediately going to secondary. It doesn't matter what, right? So at this point in time, right, you're into secondary. And not that any of this has ever happened to me, but I'm just playing this out the way that I know that things work, and plus both of our experience watching the show.
Right.
They're going to want to see what's in the ammo can. They're going to want you to open that up. Once you open it up and you show that either there's nothing in it, or there's swag in it, or a logbook or whatever, now they're going to want to know, why are you bringing that container across the border? And if your reason is because I'm going to leave it on the other side as a geocache, that's going to be a problem.
The nice thing is you're not supposed to leave it on the other side as a geocache, so there's that.
Yeah.
But what Coaster was saying, that they don't film the Canadian version of Border Security anymore, which is sad, because I love that show.
They had some great security guards on that show, but it still airs. They just don't have any new episodes.
Right. It's also on Netflix, if anybody has Netflix, at least in the US. One thing I want to mention, just because it is becoming legal in Canada and it's legal in several states, that marijuana, even if it's legal and you have whatever, medical prescribed, it's still illegal to carry it across the border. So even if you have like the permits and, everything's legal on both sides of where you're coming and going, it's still illegal to carry it across. So don't get caught with that either. And
there you go.
That's a drug thing. So that can lead to jail time. So don't do that.
That's a really big one. Absolutely. But I think one of the other things we wanted to share with you guys is to be considering, if you're crossing the border, whether it's for a single day or an overnight trip, have a plan. Most of the issues both of us have heard with the border guards is folks showing up at the border and not having a plan. They'll say, "Where are you going?" I don't know. Or, "What are you doing?" "I'm going geocaching." "Where?" "Oh, I don't know." Right? So have a plan. Know where you're going to go. Have a reason. And your reason, going geocaching in the country on the other side of that border is a totally legit reason. You will not get grief for it. They may ask you what geocaching is, and often what I found now is they're asking to make sure you know what geocaching is and you're not just using it as an excuse. If you're staying overnight, have a place to stay scouted out. Even if you're going to be camping or whatever, just let them know where you're planning to stay the night. And it does go both ways across the border. It's important stuff to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Just have a plan. I think, like you said, that's most of the stories that we've heard having issues are people just going over on a whim and not really kind of having a plan. It doesn't take much. I'm going to stay at a hotel in X city is usually sufficient, and you're going to go exploring, or geocaching is perfectly fine. Well, actually, another thing, I don't think we have it in the show notes here, but the last couple of times I've crossed the border, I have a green card in the States, a permanent residency in the States, and they asked to see that when I cross into Canada, and they've also asked many times to see my vehicle registration. They just want us to know that A, I have a green card, and B, that my vehicle is registered in the US. I'm not really sure why they ask those things, but you might want to just keep in mind that you should, if you are a permanent resident of the US, that I'm not sure if that, I wasn't asked as a when I was living in Canada, those questions, and it wasn't asked with a work visa. But as a green card holder, I've been asked those questions several times now. So just keep that in mind, that you should keep those documents handy at the border. It'll make your life easier.
Good point. I've never experienced that. It's good advice, though. Well, hey, we also have from the YouTube chat. Adam says, "My brother was in the world championship competition for archery, and it was in New York. We took his bow and arrows across the border. The border patrol just had to put a zip tie on the case." Great point, and I think that's because bows and arrows probably not restricted weapons, like handguns and things like that. So it was probably a lot easier in that sense. But again, not lawyers. But
Yeah.
Interesting story to share. Thanks, Adam. All right. One of the other things to know, particularly if you're going to Washington State, is that you need to have park passes if you're going into the Washington State parks. They actually have specific pass system that you need to know. So again, it's a little bit about doing the research, or maybe contact cashers on the other side of the border for some advice before you head either north or south.
Yeah, the Washington State passes, I'm not familiar with them specifically. I know in Oregon, a lot of the parks require passes, but you can just pay for them like right there. Like when you park, there's like a little kiosk. Is it the same with the Washington ones?
Okay, generally speaking, yes, that's the way it used to be. But I think they've actually just this year, because we just renewed our pass on our most recent hashtag geocache road trip down to Washington State. And we had to buy the pass from the Rangers office, which was open on the day we were there, which was great. But they've changed them. It used to be just a little slip of paper that you could buy from a machine, and then just put on your dash, and you could pay either $10 for a day or $30 for the year. The price hasn't changed; it's still the same in US, obviously. But the year pass now is actually a laminated card that hangs off your mirror. So you can't just sort of get that out of a machine now.
Right. It brings to mind another thing is, if you are crossing the border, it might be handy to have small bills or coins if you're going to Canada, if you can. Simple for the reason that often when you go to these parks, you don't have a pass. The pass, it's like $6 or something for the day, and they don't give change because you're just sticking your money in a slot. So if you can have a bit of small change lying around, it can be handy as well.
Good advice. Good advice. We also
had to drop like a 20 in there.
Yeah, that would suck. Yeah. We also heard from Wet Coaster in the chat, in the YouTube chat, and he gave some good advice. Said if you're going to cross the border, don't just walk across Zero Avenue. This is local to BC folks here, the Greater Vancouver area. We've got a Zero Avenue that runs right along the border. He says, don't just walk across Zero Avenue. Yes, it is one of the world's longest unwalled borders. Use one of the regular crossings. It's really good advice.
Yeah.
Just because there's nobody standing there doesn't mean you're allowed to do it.
Yeah, did you hear the story of the guys, I think it was in Michigan, who were floating down the river? They had like a big, massive float. Like 1,000 people were in like random things floating down a river, and the wind picked up and they blew them all over to Canada. So all of a sudden, 1,000 people showed up on the Canadian shores, which I thought was fantastic. And 2 days later, or 3 days later, Canada was actually invaded by U.S. Park rangers because they were doing their patrol, and they noticed that a house was on fire on the Canadian shore, and they came over and rescued some people from the house before the Canadian responders could show up. But
that was mighty neighborly.
I know, it was very nice of them. DLW4 was saying that was called the Great Float in the St. Clair River, which is a bunch of people floating for Port Huron.
I guess either the wind or currents or something got the better of them, and
just blew them all over, and it was a big kerfuffle at the time, but I think it all worked out.
I bet there was a big kerfuffle at the time, because I'm imagining none of them had their passports or their Nexus cards on them.
That was the problem. I mean, imagine most of them are in like their bathing suits. So bring your passport always.
Yep. If you're going to be near the border. Yeah.
And another thing to do when you're in a foreign country, make sure your passport is not left in your geo bag or left in your car. I always keep it on my person.
Yes.
I can in some sort of wallet that's chained to my belt. Just because if you lose that, it's way more annoying than if you just lose, like, a bit of cash or your credit cards or something. If you lose your passport when you're out of country, that can be rather annoying.
Yeah, that's one word for it. Hey, you had talked about bringing small amounts of change and money with you when you cross the border. You had some other reasons that people might want to, particularly if they're heading north.
Yeah, when you're headed north, you need to bring a tribute for the beloved great moose god Jean Chrétien. Um, it's good caching luck as well. And when you're crossing into Canada, you need to bring a toll for the Peter Mans Bridge as well. So
Joke's only funny to Canadians. I love it. All right.
yes.
And some more advice from Daryl there. You want to grab that?
Yeah, he says keep scans of the passport on your phone. It doesn't work, but it'll help if it gets lost.
Yeah, that's good advice. Good advice. Well, hey, and speaking of phones and data plans, then as a logical extension, Canadian carriers, we are starting to wise up a little bit, but the U.S. plans, they simply are cheaper. That cross-border data can be just nasty. Your thoughts?
I agree. They're absolutely hideous for the most part. I think T-Mobile is starting to get better from the American side. I know when I've gone on long road trips, until recently, I've actually just got a local phone number. I went to like a kiosk in the mall and got a couple cell phones and like a gigabyte of data because we were in the country for like 3 weeks. And that ended up being much cheaper than what the cross-border stuff would be. But right now, if you are an American, I'm not sure if it's available in Canada. I would be surprised if it was. But Project Fi, which is Google's cell phone plan, is really super awesome for cross-border. I have this now, and it's $10 a gigabyte for almost anywhere in the world, especially in Canada. Text are free, like it's unlimited text, and it's 20 cents a minute for phone calls, regardless of where you are. And so far it works really well on the northern side of the border. So if you happen to be looking for a phone plan and you're going to cross the border a lot, that's a pretty good one to get.
Good idea. Good idea. One thing that we do is have a phone with a dual SIM, so then you can just buy a cheap US plan, put the SIM on it. Although, like I said, some of the Canadian plans, some of the Canadian carriers now, for those of us, again, talking about heading south, so Canadians heading south, a lot of the Canadian carriers are now doing things like $5 a day and you get unlimited voice and text and a certain amount of data, and that generally solves the problem that we don't need to do the dual SIM thing so much anymore, which is handy. So yeah, they're starting to smarten up, but boy, it can be nasty being an American coming up here too. If you get nailed with the Canadian roaming rates, we love to have you guys pay for our data plans.
Oh, it adds up quick. Yes. Typically what I do when I cross until I got Project Fi, when I cross the border, I turn off all syncing on my phone completely until I get a Canadian plan, just because I can't afford the rates if you mess up, and it adds up quick. Wet Coaster in the YouTube chat was saying it must be interesting for those towns back east, like Vermont, where they're half in Canada and half in the U.S.
Yeah, that's got to be.
Sure how they work. I'm not sure how they work that, but
yeah. Well, I guess I'm sure they've got it worked out by now. They've had a couple hundred years to sort it out.
Yeah, this is true. I guess he's talking about cell phone plans, perhaps, potentially roaming, half in Canada, half in the U.S.
Well, I mean, my experience that, at least around here where we live, the U.S. towers are so much stronger than the Canadian that even if we're still on the Canadian side and we're close to the border, like within a kilometer or so, our phones tend to just switch over to the U.S. carriers because there's just stronger signals at that point than the Canadian. So I think probably in a lot of those kind of towns, it would probably be a similar kind of situation where the Just use a US data plan.
Yeah, if I probably would if I was in Canada, or just turn off roaming. Would probably solve part of that problem.
Yeah.
And just turn it back on when you actually need it. Daryl made another comment. Assuming Daryl made another comment, it's in the notes that there's towns where the border runs through the town, one with the border straight through the library, which must be interesting. I'm not sure exactly how they work that. If you have to go through customs to go to the history section, or if they just kind of assume the library is in one and you can only exit.
Or maybe the history section is actually divided Canadian history and American history.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting. So do you suppose like one side of the library, the Americans won the War of 1812, and the other side of the library, the Canadians won the War of 1812?
So you're saying one side of the library, the Americans won the War of 1812, and the other side of the library is nonfiction.
Yes.
Okay.
So time's running a bit short here. One thing with Americans, I've seen this come across, not so much with cashers, but with coworkers who've come across from America over to Canada. Sweet tea and Canadian iced tea, not the same thing.
Nope.
Don't order sweet tea expecting what you expect from the South. It's not going to be happy for you. It's tasty, but it's just not the same.
Well, and the same coming south, if you're a Canadian and you're used to what we have as iced tea up here, and you go down to the States and order iced tea down in the States, yeah, it's just cold tea.
Yeah. It's a culture shock. It's probably the biggest culture shock between the two nations, I think, which is it's unheralded, but it's probably the biggest difference between us. Also, don't eat the yellow snow. It is not lemon.
Unless it's served in a snow cone at a mall.
Even then, I wouldn't risk it. Get the cherry snow cone.
There you go. There you go. Well, you know what? I think you're right, Dave. We're running right up at time here. We had another little piece of information came in that said, I think Daryl might be talking about the Haskell Free Library in Derby Line, Vermont. So there you go. A little bit of trivia for people to Google up and take a look at. We wanted to get into talking a little bit about the metric versus imperial system, but I just don't think we're going to have time tonight, Dave. So you know what? Maybe Daryl can have us back another show. We can just talk metric versus imperial.
That sounds like a fun show.
Oh, yeah. That'd be great. But hey.
It's 10.
In the meantime, you know, folks, we want to thank you for listening. We want to remind you that coming up December 1st, GeoGearHeads 257 Trackable Partnerships 1 with Sharkbait KTD and Carly. That sounds interesting. Dave, what's the next one?
The next one is December 8th, which is GeoGearHeads 258, Geocaching Insights 2, and Rock Chalk comes on to talk about what's been happening at the lily pad.
Nice. I love Rock Chalk. What a great guy. December 15th, GeoGearHeads 259, 3D printing number 5. 5 of those already. Wow. Shermanator 18, C. Nelson, and Antaeus. They're going to be on to talk about getting started with 3D printing geocaches. That sounds like a really good lineup.
Yeah, it does sound good. And December 22nd, GeoGearHeads 260, which should be the randomized, I'm going to say 52. It's LII. I think that's 52. I'm going with 52.
I got your back.
52? All right, 52. All right.
Check the Cachemaniacs website at cachemaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes for this and all our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by emailing geogearheads at cachemaniacs.com or through social media. Your support helps keep the Cachemaniacs shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through the link in our show notes to support the Cachemaniacs shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Suffenauer and Daryl Weinberg. The show is copyright 2016 by Daryl Weinberg. All rights reserved.